Good morning. I'm actually excited. I was nervous for the last 7 weeks about this moment, but how good God is, it's like it just overwhelms you, and then the ability and the opportunity to be able to tell multiple people at once is kind of lucky. I'm lucky. I've been really blessed with this series, and I've always loved looking at, the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. And there was a time in college we had someone come in, and there was a sermon that was done on the Beatitudes, and there was a point made about it that just opened it up for me, and I remembered it forever. But we have this group of people that, if you read back in Matthew 5, you see that Jesus' fame is spreading. And you have all of these people gathered, and I was thinking about all of you, how we come from different places. We've heard, they had heard about Jesus. They had seen what he had been doing. Some of them had been healed. Some of them had just, heard a neighbor's, cousin's, brother's story or something like that. Others were religious leaders that were offended by what was going on. Others had maybe heard from John. You have this big group, and now you have Jesus coming together, and I picture all of them in the audience at totally different levels of maybe interest, or they're totally sold, they can't get enough, or they're, hanging back, like, what's this guy about to say to us? And he starts Jesus' whole thing, and all of Matthew, one of the key themes of Matthew is the kingdom of God. And so Jesus has this whole story. This is what my kingdom is going to look like. And the point that I heard in college, he was looking at the preacher. He was looking at the Beatitudes, and the first and the last one have the same promise. If you look in Matthew chapter 5, and you guys can use your pew Bibles, as I'm going to use it so we have the same version. And the first one is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then the last one, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I remember whether he said it or whether I just thought of it, but I pictured a sandwich, and he's like, this is my kingdom. Let me tell you what it looks like. It starts with the promise that yours is the kingdom of heaven. It ends with yours is the kingdom of heaven. And these are all the types of people that are going to be in there. You're going to have the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You're going to have those who are mourning. They'll be comforted. You're going to have those who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness. They're going to be filled. This is the place. And this is all the different types. And it's just so beautiful how he spoke to all the people in all of their places. And I know from my experience, some of you guys don't know my background or anything, but I'm from Minnesota. I was a dean. I have worked with teenagers for the last 20 years. So pardon my lingo, but I use a lot of teenager expressions because I've only hung out with teenagers. I lived with them. They were down the hall. I text with them. I know all the little slangs. I actually, a couple years ago, stopped trying to learn them all because they change very quickly. And so I would learn, I don't remember, they were trying to teach me bussin' a couple months ago. They're like, Dean Lawren, that's bussin'. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't. I'm getting too old for this. So excuse that, but I was looking at how Jesus speaks to each one, and how for the teenagers that I worked with, they would lack that confidence and that kind of assurance in their position with God. And I'm not sure if I'm saved. I'm not sure if he's forgiven me. I'm just not confident. I don't know if I have that good of a relationship. And we would look at this, and I remember thinking, for me, that solidified some things for me, because God's like, there's this wide margin of people, and I'm everything for them. I will fill and answer everything that they need, and theirs is the kingdom of heaven, theirs is the kingdom of heaven, and as long as they're with me, they're in this big, yummy sandwich. That won't probably go over well in second service, so we're starting to get hungry, but for right now, I'm hoping you guys are all sitting good on breakfast. and you're okay. So since no one knows me that well, a little bit of background. This is my family, part of my family, very, very small part. There are 6 kids in my family, and the reason why I show this, the one on the left, that's at my wedding. It's my husband, Ronnie. It was 9 years ago, and one of my favorite pictures of my siblings. And then the one on the right, I think that was in 2016, maybe a graduation of someone's. It was probably actually I think it was in Pastor Doug's parents' backyard. We're very close with his parents. I don't know him as well as I knew his parents. And then, so the dynamic in our family, there's 3 older kids, and then there's 3 younger kids, all from the same parents, but there's a break of 6 years between, and then my parents had 3 more. And the reason I bring this up is because my message today is on the Beatitude, blessed are the peacemakers. And when I was thinking about this, I said, okay, we need to have a picture of peace. What is this peace? And I was like, I know what peace is not, for sure. I was thinking back, who is a peacemaker? My mom. Oh my goodness. If you had, okay, we're going to go back to the original 3, and my cousin is up here too. This actually was the Delafields. Bernadine Delafield is my great aunt, and we went to their house for Christmas. I must have been 9, 10 here. I'm in the hot pink and teal jacket. Yeah, late 80s, 90s. And then my brother, Christopher, he's 2 years older than me. He's the oldest. And then my sister, Alyssa, she's just less than 2 years younger than me. Christopher and I, we fought a lot. So it's kind of when you have a boy and a girl, I feel like you have, especially as the oldest, you have this oldest child problem that both of them think they're the oldest child because one's the oldest boy and one's the oldest girl. And so we both were a little bit like, I'm in charge, and we fought a lot. And my mom had this very, I feel, divinely inspired idea as a peacemaker with her children. And she got so sick of Christopher and I fighting against each other that instead of separating us, she decided she was going to tie us together. So she tied our arms, like one arm, like a 3-legged race, but she tied our arms and our legs together, and she said, until you guys learn to get along, you're stuck with each other. Obviously, we would take bathroom breaks separately, but we were stuck. And I remember there were these stages. I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but there's some things that I do remember. There were these stages of like, I cannot believe, like he's so annoying. We were probably hitting each other. And then she said, it's just going to last longer. You're going to be with the person you hate. It's fine with me. Sounds the same. She was probably just giving up. I don't know why she had 3 more kids after that. Anyway, so we're fighting, and then we get through this stage where we're kind of like, okay, let's make the best of it. I remember thinking we decided to make up new words for insults because we weren't allowed to call each other names. So we started calling each other like sweetie, muffin. It was all like food names once again. But eventually it turned into a joke, and we found this camaraderie, and all was well. And I remember after that point, we kind of just started clicking a little bit better. In college, he was one of my best friends, and my mom probably was patting herself on the back, thinking like, oh yeah, look what I did, and like, thank you, Jesus, for making peace with my children, that they've come together. And then poor Alyssa, because Christopher and I found we worked very well together, and Alyssa was the odd one out. And soon we just turned against her, and I'm still apologizing for her. But I was realizing, and maybe my mom realized, that sort of peace is very short-lived. The sort of peace that we think there is, according to the world, it's fairly short-lived if we are basing it on a lack of conflict, basing it on a lack of arguing or anything like that. So if you sit here today, and I'm going kind of to the word peace because in order to be a peacemaker, you have to understand what Jesus' version of peace was. What was he telling them? And in his kingdom, there will be peacemakers. So what does that look like? And let's see. This is something I picture. A little beach moment with your boo, and you're just relaxing and enjoying this moment of whatever. But like I said, the world's kind of peace is only as good as the circumstances. So it's all good. And you think, yes, I finally have peace. I just needed this vacation. And then the weather rolls in, or maybe someone forgot something. This is the least violent I could find, Someone forgot something in the car, or maybe the keys got locked in the car. And all of a sudden, your peace is out the window because now you're fighting with that same person that moments before you were just tenderly enjoying the moment. And then, from someone coming from Minnesota, there's the nighttime when you're realizing you should have put on sunscreen 6 times instead of 3, and you're fried. And your peace, once again, if we go by what the world is saying, out the window, because it's only as good as what your circumstance is, right? So in the Bible, in their time frame, Hebrew for peace is shalom. You guys, maybe some of you have heard that, shalom, peace for you. In Greek, it's eirene. It's the same, their construct of it had to do, it's a little bit different. We kind of come at peace as being, if you could remove these things from us, then I'll have peace. Take away my to-do list, take away the dishes, take away the laundry, take away this nagging person at work, or take away the conflict in my relationship, and then I'll have peace. So we look at it as kind of a removing. And in the Old Testament and the New Testament, the mindset of the people was an addition to complete. So it's just the opposite. There's not one better or worse. It's just different so that when you come into what Jesus is saying, you can kind of understand why he's giving the examples that he is. And so as we're looking at this, and we're thinking, oh, just take away these things, and they're thinking, oh, just add this, just add a new king of Israel. Just add back our freedom, and we'll be complete, we'll be full. So there's many versions of this, but I wanted to just look at what Jesus says about peace. And one of the first things that came into my mind without much looking, because this is one of my favorite verses, and Jesus says, peace I leave with you in John 14:27. My peace I give you, I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Perfect. Thank you, Jesus. We don't want peace like the world. We don't want peace that is here 1 second, and then when the rain clouds come out, it's gone. We don't want peace that we're like, oh, I'm so content with what I'm doing here at work. I'm feeling accomplished. And then as soon as someone critiques our work, it's gone. I don't want that kind of peace. I want something different. But then I found some other triggering statements about peace that Jesus gave. In Matthew 10:34, he says, do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that so much. And then again, in Luke 12:51, this is Luke's version of what Jesus said. This is what Luke heard. Do you suppose that I came to give peace on earth? I tell you, not at all, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one house will be divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. Father will be divided against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And this doesn't sound so great anymore. And I point this out because Jesus' version, if anytime you spend time in the Word, especially in the Gospels, you see that Jesus' version of things is almost always different than what the people are expecting. And he's saying here, it's not going to be everyone always getting along. The peace that I'm bringing, the message that I'm here for, is going to cause some division, and there's going to be some problems. And I don't know if any of you guys like peace, and if you like the lack of conflict. I really like to be at peace. I like my spirit to be resting, which is why being nervous for 7 weeks thinking about speaking was not my favorite thing. I don't want to be nervous for that long. I told Pastor Doug, if I'm going to preach, just tell me the morning of. Perfect. I'll just keep some sermons in my back pocket and then just go up there. Please. It'll be easier. And here Jesus is saying it's not going to be like that. It's not always going to be peaceful with each other. That's not what it's looking like. And there's a couple stories that I want to, we'll take this one, but if you can turn in your Bibles to, let's start with Luke chapter 7. There's two stories that I want to look at really quickly because I want to look at what Jesus is doing and how he is bringing peace and how it is also bringing division and what it looks like. So in Luke chapter 7, verse 36, we have a story that many of you have heard. Jesus is nearing the end. Maybe I skipped too far ahead, but I just love this story. Jesus is nearing the end of his time on earth. Maybe not many people know that, but he's been invited to a Pharisee's house, and we can take this off for a little bit because it's kind of the ending, but the Pharisees invited Jesus to dinner with him, and so he went to the Pharisee's house, he reclined at the table, and when a woman, verse 37, who had lived a sinful life in that town, she learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, and she brought an alabaster jar of perfume, and she stood behind him at his feet weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears, and then she wiped them with her hair, and she kissed them and poured perfume on them. And when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. And Jesus reads his thoughts, and he says, if there was a man, two men are owing money to a certain money lender, one owes 500 and the other owes 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he canceled both of them. Which of them will love him more? Which one will be more appreciative? And Simon says, well, obviously the one who had more forgiven. And he said, yeah, exactly. Both of these, he doesn't discount the fact that this woman had lived a sinful life. He was just saying that this woman in his kingdom, she's coming out of an overwhelm of appreciation for who Jesus was and what he had. And he's pointing this out. And you can tell that there is some conflict in the people around this table because they're looking at what Jesus is doing. They're looking at what this woman is doing. They're looking at who she is and what kind of person she is. And they're also filtering that through what they see from the world and their perspective and their world eyes. And it doesn't make sense, and it's kind of making them freeze a little bit, like, wait. Man, should he be doing this? And it's stopping them. And here Jesus is looking at this woman, and I'm picturing now, because we've gone through this series, blessed are the poor in spirit. Here you have this woman, and she's been through all this. She sees the answer in Jesus. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are hungering and thirsting. And she's at Jesus' feet, and she has all of these things. I feel like she could fit all of those. The first four in the Beatitudes are all like a spiritual need of what Jesus has to offer. And she's there at his feet, and she's pouring out her gratitude or her appreciation or her faith in the only way that she knows how. Unaware, she's not worried about what people are thinking anymore. She's not worried about any of that. She's just pouring it out. And Jesus, he turns to the woman. This is in verse 44 to 46. Then he turns to the woman and he says to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house and you didn't give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You didn't put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven. This often caused division. If we're talking about Jesus, his words about bringing not peace, but a sword, this division, these words right here, her sins have been forgiven. As her great love has been shown, and whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. Once again, that sword. Because the people are seeing things through their own version of how things would be. And here's a man who was born in Nazareth that grew up and, it doesn't fit. How can he say something like that only God can say? And they're running it through that filter, and I don't know how to handle it. And the guests begin to say among themselves, who is this that even forgives sins? And Jesus says to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in eirene, go in peace. Remember, this is a completeness. Whatever this woman came thinking that she was lacking, I need to be filled. I need what he has will complete me. And Jesus says, your sins are forgiven. So from our view of complete peace is taking away those things that are, ruining our peace. Her sins are taken away. And from their version, from the Bible times, he's filled her, and she is now complete, and she leaves in fullness of what Jesus has done for her. It's so beautiful. There's one more story that I love this story, and it's in John chapter 9. These are not stories that have not been preached from the pulpit before, but that's okay. Jesus gave us, you get something new every single time. So in John chapter 9, and I want to continue on this vein of like how the world sees something and how Jesus came to bring a different perspective. So we have this man who's been born blind. And you can see in this story, I'm going to focus, and maybe I'll tell it, it'll be a little bit different for you. Hopefully, the Spirit will move, and you'll see things. This man and the Pharisees, those are the two groups in the story that I want to focus on. I want to look at the man's journey and how he kind of experiences Jesus in this story, and then also at the Pharisees and their filter and their lens. So this man is born blind, and the disciples, their perspective, their worldly, how they see things, right? And how all the people then, they're like, he must have been a sinner for him to have this. That was how they saw things. If you have a certain lifestyle, we have people here, I pass by and there's homeless, on the side of the roads. And it might be a default, I wonder what they did to get there. Are we that different when our reaction, it must be something that they did. And so the disciples and the people in Jesus' group, they're kind of having this like, what, Jesus, what did he do? I'm not going to focus on the disciples, though. I'm going to focus on this man. Let's look at this man. Jesus comes to him. He's blind. He knows that people think all sorts of things about him. He's sitting there. A man comes and spits in mud and puts it in his eyes. I couldn't get over this. I was just sitting there thinking, if this was me, I wouldn't trust anyone ever. I definitely wouldn't let someone just touch me, let alone put mud that I, maybe Jesus was a silent spitter. I'm not sure. But I don't know that I would be comfortable with a stranger putting mud in my eyes. And yet we don't see a lot between this story, but we do see Jesus tell him, go. Verse 7, he told him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. This word meant sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. It's just a lot in a couple words. It's a lot to process. But this man, whatever he heard, whatever his spirit was sensing in Jesus, he took him at his word. He could have gone to any pool. You have spit mud in your eyes. You're going to want to get that out as soon as possible. Whatever's closest. I don't know how far away he was, but he went exactly where Jesus said. He washed, and physically, he was restored. Physically, he was given his vision back. It's what? Then the rest of the story, he goes home, and his neighbors, how are you seeing? And he's just probably stunned, I imagine being stunned. He's like, well, a guy spit in mud, put in my eyes, told me to wash. I did. I can see everything. And then they bring him to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are thinking, what happened? And he repeats his story of what happened. He says, a man spit in mud, put it on my eyes, he told me to wash it, and now I can see. And he's dwelling on this, right? He's letting it kind of sink into his heart. How is this possible? He must be a prophet. I don't get it. He must be a prophet. And then the Pharisees have their own little journey going on, and they come back to him again because they just can't get it. And they said, tell us again, tell us the truth. And he says, I told you. He came, he spit in he put the mud, I washed it, and I can see. There's no way that he could have done this unless he was from God. And he says that, the man, verse Ooh. Verse 18, the Jews didn't believe him. The parents were arguing, so the second time they come back, this is the third time that the man is telling his story. And they said, we know he's a sinner. He's like, I don't know if he's a sinner or not. All I know is that I was blind and now I see. And he keeps focusing on what? He keeps retelling it. And as he's telling it, you can tell it's not just his physical blindness that has been restored. His heart is opening, and he starts stepping a little bit more into the light that Jesus came to bring. Maybe he's a prophet. I don't know if he's a sinner or not, but he has to be from God because this is crazy. I can see everything. And his eyes are open a little bit more. And then he says, you can see he commits to being a disciple because he tells the Pharisees, are you going to be a disciple too? And he's there. There's something different about this man, and his heart is opening, and he's softening, and he's getting committed, right? So Jesus finds him because the man he doesn't care anymore about what the world says is okay or not okay because he gets kicked out of the synagogue. And he's just thinking Jesus has more than just my vision in store for me. Jesus finds him after he's kicked out of the synagogue. Jesus finds him, and I skipped all of this. It's totally fine. Maybe I didn't have it on here, but Jesus' interaction with the man is so beautiful. It's so sweet. Verse 35. Sorry, I'm used to my own Bible, so when you look at a different Bible, everything kind of moves around. Jesus heard, in verse 35, John chapter 9, he heard that they had thrown this man out, and when he found him, he went looking for him. He said, do you believe in the Son of Man? And this man's heart is ready. He says, who is he, sir? The man said, tell me so that I can believe in him. I'll believe whatever you say because I've experienced too much. I've seen too much to know it's out of this world. Jesus said, you have now seen him. You've seen him. In fact, he's the one speaking with you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe, and he fell on his knees and worshiped him. Right then, his heart had been opening to the possibility that was outside of what he could see on the world. And we have this other side that I'm going to go through fairly quickly, and that's the Pharisees. They are told this man's story by the neighbors. They're brought, and they hear his story, but they're triggered by the Sabbath because, you see, Jesus healed this man on the Sabbath. That's a sin. And they're triggered by what they see as appropriate righteousness, and they're triggered and they can't get past it. They're like, wait, if he broke the Sabbath, then he can't be from God. But if he healed this person who was born blind, that's only can be done if they're from God, right? And so they're a little bit torn. He has to be a sinner, and they're battling back and forth. And it says in the text that they were divided. They didn't know. And I came to bring division. It's crazy. So they decide he's either from God and performed this crazy miracle, or he's a sinner and the story's wrong. It has to be the second one. The story's wrong. They go to the parents. They go to the man again. Each time, their hearts are deciding, I'm going to look as the world looks. It doesn't make sense with what I see. And their hearts are closed more and more. And they've already made up their minds. The story reminded me a little bit of Jonah in the sense that they had already told, the parents, they were scared of what to say because they knew if anyone, the religious leaders had already said, if you say that Jesus is a Messiah, you're going to be kicked out of the synagogue. So they've already made public statements against Jesus. So now that this thing has happened and the religious leaders are like, oh, we have to stand by our word, our pride. There's all of these things factoring in. And they want to hold on to what they know. They decide to hang on to Moses and the law, and he can't possibly, because he's breaking what we think. And they throw the man out of the synagogue. They insult him. It's sad. It's sad because you have the man walking into light, spiritual rebirth, and you have the Pharisees and the religious leaders closing off that. They choose to see only as the world and what they understand, and they don't let their hearts be open. And Jesus he comes to them, and after this man falls on his feet and worships, the end of chapter 9, Jesus says, "For judgment I came into this world so that the blind will see," not just physically, but the man's heart, his spiritual heart was open, and he saw. "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God," like we heard from Pastor Andres last week. So, for judgment I have come into the world, Jesus says, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. I never got that before. I was always like, just skip it. I never understood what he was saying. It was actually this last part that I didn't get. The Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and said, "What, are we blind?" And Jesus says, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." This is the part that I was like, "Oh, Jesus, could you just speak clearly?" But I get it. He said if you were blind, he's talking about blind to the world, the things that you think should be, the way that they should be. If you were blind to that, you would not be guilty of sin. Because you have this man who was born blind, he sees physically, but then he chooses to see things the way that Jesus is revealing to him. He considers the world dead to him, and he keeps walking in this is weird, this is strange, I don't understand it, but he has to be from God. And he walks into it, and Jesus says to him and to the woman, that's the story I shared, he's given this forgiveness of sins. He's completed them. And then you have, if you claim you see, your guilt remains, like the Pharisees. "Oh, we know, we get it." And their guilt remains. I look at blessed are the peacemakers. If we are not, one, willing to be open and submit humbly to what God is revealing, sometimes it doesn't make sense. We have to be careful that we are not trying to apply what the world says is sensible. We have to be careful. Often what I've found with Jesus is if his message seems too good to be true, I'm getting closer. He was a little bit too good to be true. We have to be careful that we are humble, that we are saying, "God, open the spiritual eyes of my heart. I don't want to be blind. I don't want to be stuck on how I think things should be or how they make sense. I want to be accepting of what you have, and I want to be complete in you." And I know this call that Jesus has is blessed are the peacemakers. We have to be secure in our peace. And once you know that, you cannot help but share. Jesus has forgiven me. And I know what that is like. I know what it feels like to be forgiven, to know that I'm not deserving to be part of God's kingdom. I know it. But Jesus made me deserving. It's overwhelming. It blows my mind. It makes me cry often. It makes me get up in front of large groups of people and talk. But it's amazing. And when you understand that you've been made complete, that he has completed you, you want to tell other people. They're hurting. They don't know. Share it. You're complete. Jesus has completed you. Let's walk together. And Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." It's the same words in Greek that refers to Jesus as a son of God. It's just plural. That's crazy. We're called the sons of God. He uses the same terminology as Jesus. If it's too good to be true, when it has to do with Jesus, it probably is. So I just want to leave you with this. Hopefully your hearts are burning. You know how good it is, how good he is. If it doesn't feel like it's that good, come and talk to me because it's good. We'll get a better sense, or until you're overwhelmed and crying on the floor, God is so good. And then we just need to share. We need to tell other people that they're complete, that their peace is in Jesus, and they're full. And it's not as the world gives, it's forever.